discovering the atmosphere of the encounter with Christ. Before we begin, I wanted to save some paper. I have a few of my sheets printed out here, but I recommend scanning the QR code if you can, just to save a little bit of paper and make it easier. It helps with additional info. If anyone doesn't have the ability to have some handouts here, but so to begin, I really want to explain what this presentation is and how. The whole idea is I am presenting the statistical and anecdotal data which I gathered through a survey of BC students and how BC students responded to the survey I had of different encounters with Christ that they have had. The idea of the survey is to help understand the factors that influence the youth receptivity of Christ and encounters with them. So this entire project started with a theory I had, which was that Catholic adolescents, specifically high school students, they would have high school students that were born into the faith would have some type of turning point. This turning point I best describe as a time when a person begins to build their own identity of who they are and discover what they actually believe. I'm sure some of you may have had in your own experience of high school, as if you grew up Catholic in a Catholic high school, may have had experiences of classmates leaving the faith or not being that involved. That was the premise of investigating all of this. The idea behind this turning point I talk about is that it is linked to an encounter with Christ. This encounter can be very positive, it can be negative, or it can just be completely dismissed. But the outcome of this encounter leads to how much priority a youth will give the faith in their life. It ultimately will decide if they want to remain religious, and this, like I said, developed my own personal witness. The idea is that by knowing the factors that might influence a youth's potential of encountering Christ positively, youth ministers can better create the atmosphere which can hopefully keep more youth in the faith when they come across their turning point. So before we begin, I want to do a few quick clarifications just so everyone knows what I mean by things. A positive encounter with Christ, that's what I'm describing as an encounter which leads one closer to Christ. To respect the privacy of research participants, everything that is more specific has been generalized. So factors I'm saying may be watered down to not be as specific to respect privacy of the participants. This project explores the factors surrounding participants when they receive an encounter with Christ. I want to make it clear, this is by no means saying that we can control God and that these factors cause the encounter. This is just the factors that I have found influence the receiving of God in an encounter. So to begin the demographics, we had 57 students take part in the survey. The majority of these students were upperclassmen and female, with 45 participants being at least 20 years old, and 38 of the 57 being at least juniors. Here we have the numbers and statistics there. Every participant who took the survey, I did not practice, I'm sorry. Here's the grade that will break down of them all. Every participant who took place is Catholic. There are some who were not born into the faith and converted during high school, before high school and college. There's more on this in the infographic that you all scanned. The participants covered a wide variety of student groups. I found this interesting because the faith-based groups, the clubs, and faith-based clubs were the highest participant to show the broadness of the students that had these encounters in the past. It's not necessarily the people who are high up and thought of as having a huge faith-oriented life who might be on campus ministry or whatnot. So getting to the actual encounter with Christ, there are two types of encounters that I asked about. A specific moment, which is a encounter of, hey, this happened at this time, this was the environment, this is who was there, whatever. And 40 of the 57 participants definitively had a yes to a specific moment of an encounter. And then there's the gradual encounter. This is what I consider more of, I may have not had a specific thing, but God has been in my life impacting, and I've recognized that from the very beginning. We had all 29 who said they had a gradual one. The types of encounters were not exclusive. So you could have, the participants could have a set moment and also a gradual moment. So what were the factors that influenced the encounters? Suffering was the top encounter with 20 participants having some form of suffering regarding their encounter with Christ. This was, suffering meaning some type of mental health issue, family drama, divorces happening from the family, friends, a breakup, something of that kind. Next up, there's education, and this is regarding the participant having learned more about God and His goodness, how He is, what He does for us, and the fact that Christ was crucified, died, all of these things for us, for the individual, for me, for you, for all of us. The third one was some form of retreat. This was not only like high-end retreats like Steubenville, which I'm sure many of you have gone to in the past, but also simple retreats as what a parish might put on, or a diocese. Next up would be personhood, person. This was as simple as a teacher, a friend, someone, a priest during confession, someone that had a little bit of an impact personally relating to this impact, this encounter with Christ. The next up is adoration. I'm kind of covering things here. Adoration, obviously, you know what adoration is. The encounter happened during adoration for 11 of the 57 participants. Again, showing how Christ being present there helps with this encounter. Sacrament, this was specifically to the sacrament of confession that participants received in encounter. But there are also a few people who put encounters happening to receiving Eucharist and even anointing the sick, one of them. And on to our community and service. Community is something to do, most of them was like youth group, right? Just having the community to build the faith in. And service, there were a few people that had encounters happen through serving, whether it be helping with Totus Tuus, helping with retreats in their area, whatever it might be. So how did the encounter impact the participants? Here we have a breakdown of how the participants gauge their activity in the faith, their consistency before, during, and after high school or now in college. Before high school, there were consistent things that would be done, but look at the difference between always and everywhere. Before high school and now during high school. During high school is where the vast majority of these encounters happened. 28 of these encounters were said to happen during high school, according to the info I gathered, and 6 of which occurred during junior high, and 12 during college, one of them actually during elementary. The missing 10 did not submit an answer, but they can be seen here, I believe, if you want to look at the numbers. The ages of the encounter varied among everyone, but the average majority of age of all the encounters was between 14 and 16 years old. This not only seems to be confirming my hypothesis earlier of the encounter and turning point occurring sometime during high school, but it also teaches us what age proper youth ministry becomes even more necessary and valuable. there was a clear increase in how consistent participants were in their faith activities during high school. And now, look how much BC has impacted the everything that we do every day, being surrounded by opportunities. So, what does all this information teach us, right? That's too much. What does all the information teach us? I'm going to go on a little bit of monologue here now. The three largest factors, as I said earlier, in any type of encounter with Christ was suffering, education, and some type of retreat. This information shown and discussed teaches us how important education on the faith is for everybody. Suffering is a very big part of life. I'm sure we've all gone through our fair share of it. And the information presented is from the students who have had a positive encounter and are the current BC students. How many people out there have not had a positive encounter? How many people have gone through the suffering and don't know Christ? There are so many, and that's likely due to not having a strong education in the faith. It's so much harder, whenever suffering occurs, it is so much harder to attribute something to God if you do not know Him or you don't ask Him for things. This is why it is so important to have proper education of the faith. It is so necessary. 42 of the 57 participants, this again is on one of the infos that you scanned, 42 of the 57 participants were homeschooled or went through private high school. Private high school meaning Catholic or Christian. It tells us that a faith-oriented and centered education teaches the youth not only to go to God, but to know Him as our Father and as our friend. The last 3 pages of the handout that you scanned, and I have the copies here again, if you look at them, they show the participants' gauge of their involvement in faith-related activities. This is weekend mass, daily mass, different sacraments, going to confession, adoration, daily prayer, the rosary. During high school, compared to before high school, you can see a significant increase in the activity becoming more consistent and habitual. I don't have it right here to show, and then after high school, getting into college, that becomes almost consistent. Daily prayer goes up to 27 of the 57 participants, I believe. And that makes a lot of sense because currently, BC students are more active in the faith because, well, we are surrounded by opportunities for it. It also tells us that when we are serving youth, we need to have opportunities available. The same way, almost the same way we have at BC. Means consistent daily mass, consistent able to get to adoration and sacraments. So I hope when all of this has made sense. I've been trying to jump over the place to get through things at the time I have. To recap some of it all, the data that I gathered and present today affirms the theory that I had developed about cradle Catholics having some type of turning point. This is huge for me because it affirms what I've been thinking for ages, but confirming the theory of the turning point, it also helps us better do youth ministry in ways that will help inspire a positive outcome with Christ among the youth. This means that youth ministry can become more personal and allow ministers to be able to better apply the correct methods to people who might be going through the turning point. It does leave a very big question of how we can begin to identify those going through the turning point so that we can better serve them when they have these sufferings and have these encounters so that we are more likely to keep them in the faith and keep them with Christ. Ministers can so much better identify and serve those who might be undergoing everything that they're going through, the suffering, the turning point, all these things. That is all I have, and I hope it all makes sense. I don't have no idea how much time. I think I was good on time. will take a few questions still. I want to make sure there's a bit of time for that, but if anyone has anything. Yeah.
Do you have any interest in like redoing this this Discovery Day project just so you have like a larger sample size? Because I mean 57 is, and you mentioned you said 42 of the 57 were Catholic and private school, or sorry, homeschool or private school, meaning that the sample wasn't necessarily representative.
Yeah.
So like I think it was really great, really good questions, really good survey, but maybe even more useful if it was on a larger scale with a lot more.
Yeah, that was one of the.
participation.
Sorry, that was one of the big distinguishing things, and how it's very hard to get people by their own free will to take a survey they didn't want to take.
Right. No, absolutely.
But that was what this initial survey was for, because this is proving the theory. This is proving the affirmation that there's so much more to learn here and explore. And I'm definitely going to be doing increasing surveys and studies in the future. I can promise you that, because this is one of the first things among youth ministry and evangelization that it's one of my majors, evangelization catechesis, that everything I've been taught in my classes, this statistically and evidentially backs up. Which is something that I found crazy of how you tell me all the experience and all the teachings we have about evangelizing and catechesis is really just from the experience of the people before us. It's valid, of course, but it's also like throwing mud at a wall and seeing what sticks. It's not that efficient, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
So, any other questions? Yeah.
What was it like trying to, I think you did this really well, but assimilating, picking statistics along with looking at these super broad and important questions about life, and covering both areas in a way that doesn't dismiss the other?
Yeah, that was one of the most challenging things about this entire project is most of the graphs that I showed and everything were not I had to take that from the stories I was given. I was taking the anecdotes and these evidence of just people telling their story and pulling out every key factor. I've been through it at 57 separate accounts of all these things, and there were things, like I said, that were very, very traumatic. I feel bad for some people who served, but they came out on top. That's why I find this so valuable to know, because this impacts people's lives. I know growing up, I always felt like I have to be this perfect Catholic because that's what my parents are. And then I messed up, and all of a sudden I feel like I'm being not welcome, or I'm pushed away from these things because I'm not who all these people think I am. And so it sent me through my own mental health crisis. And that was when I had my own encounter with Christ, oddly enough, which is another means of starting this. I am so lucky and fortunate. I was surrounded by the upbringing, the people, friends who were able to help me have a positive encounter in those moments. Because I would not be where I am today without that. Yeah.
I was just wondering, so now hearing that you read stories, especially with suffering being the number one, obviously when some people experience suffering, they go the opposite way. They don't encounter Christ in it. And so I was wondering if you found a thread among the stories that you read that did lead to Christ, because obviously suffering in itself it's an evil, but it can lead someone to ask big questions about their life and their purpose. I was wondering if you found a thread between the stories of like what came after the suffering that led them to that encounter. Like was it someone caring for them, or was it just them saying like, what's the purpose of my life, and then like going after that question?
Yeah, I can't go into a whole lot of detail because of the privacy of it, but the suffering was when they went to God. They were going through some type of suffering, and one of the most common ones was my parents are getting divorced, so I think I can say at that time, and how they were at a low point in their lives, and instead of turning their back on God and being bitter, they went to Him. And the majority of responses were saying, read that in class, or I learned this, or I was reading the Bible. It shows us how important the education is for that time of suffering there. a little over 2 years ago, I had a near-death experience. And instead of being bitter and hating everything because my life had been changed so much, I legitimately posted on Facebook not even a month after it happened, God chose this for me, this is my path. I would not have had that mentality without my prior education of my faith. So, this is why suffering is something that is unavoidable in everyone's lives. How we respond to it is what we can change. And I have a very strong belief that the education of faith, education of who God is, what He is so valuable for those reasons. So yeah. Thank you again. Just kind of all over the place, but I hope it all makes sense.